The National News Desk, locally covered, nationally connected.
We have been told that there are no survivors.
The deadliest air crash in almost 25 years. What we're learning about the shocking collision authorities say could have been avoided as victims are identified. A 65-year-old federal gun sales ban struck down the question it creates about who can now purchase a firearm. Then trust in social media, how artificial intelligence is impacting what teens believe about what they see online. This is the National News Desk, America's News Now. I'm Amira David. Tonight, tragedy on the Potomac. What began as a search and rescue mission has turned into a recovery operation after an American Airlines flight from Wichita, Kansas to Washington, D.C. collided with a Black Hawk helicopter just before 9 p.m. Eastern last night. It's the first major commercial plane crash in the United States since 2009. And right now, all 64 people on board believed to be dead, along with another 3 soldiers on that helicopter who were reportedly doing an annual training exercise at the time. 28 bodies have been pulled from the water so far. And right now we're learning the identities of some of the victims. 53-year-old Ian Epstein, who was a flight attendant on that plane. 34-year-old Jonathan Campos, captain of the flight, along with his co-pilot, First Officer Samuel Lilly, just 28 years old. A Cincinnati native, Elizabeth Keys, was also on the flight. She just turned 33 yesterday. President Trump earlier today said he was horrified by the news.
This was a dark and excruciating night in our nation's capital and in our nation's history, and a tragedy of terrible proportions. As one nation, we grieve for every precious soul that has been taken from us so suddenly. And we are a country of, really, we are in mourning.
While speaking, Trump also questioned the FAA's DEI-based recruiting efforts, suggesting there could be some correlation between recent hires and the failure that led to that crash. The administration didn't point to specific evidence. At this time, a robust investigation by the NTSB into the collision is underway. The DoD says the pilots aboard the helicopter were fairly experienced and said they had night goggles. Meantime, that passenger jet, we're told, had done nothing abnormal in the lead up to the crash. So that leaves a lot of unanswered questions, lots of confusion over what may have happened. Investigative reporter Scott Taylor here with us. He's been asking those tough questions all day long, joining us live now. And I know that there are a lot of questions that, federal investigators are looking at right now.
Yeah, and we're still waiting for a lot of the answers. Now, one of the most serious questions investigators will be asking, how did the plane and the Black Hawk helicopter end up in the same airspace right next to the airport? It's crystal clear that the American airline plane had to make a turn at the end of its approach to Reagan Airport so it could land on a specific runway. The Black Hawk helicopter's route was at a different altitude, much lower, but that could have played into the plane's line of sight. It's possible the helicopter was hidden for a brief moment under the belly of the plane as it turned into its final approach.
You've got 2 routes that cross over each other on a final approach and a helicopter, which only a couple hundred feet of potentially of separation. It's not hard for either aircraft to be off, 50 to 75 to 100 feet. That's not unusual, especially with the way planes operate. And so you're not dealing with a whole lot of margin of error there. And I thought, when I saw that, I thought that was a little strange that you would have, putting airplanes that close together.
Investigators will also be looking at 2 near misses that happened just last year at the same airport.
Yeah, it's really incredible. It appears to be the culmination of an alarming pattern. And what about those recent flights that have been added to the airport, including that very Kansas route?
You're right. It's something the feds will look at. And if you live in D.C., you know helicopters are flying all over the city and at this airport. Very, very busy airspace.
Yeah, so many questions right now, so little answers. Hopefully more to come as we move forward. Scott Taylor in Washington, D.C., thank you so much for that report. And right now, over 20 million people are under alerts for flooding or winter weather as a low pressure system moves across the country. Heavy rain and severe storms forecast from eastern Texas up to southern Michigan and from Colorado over to Maryland. The worst of it is expected from eastern Kentucky into West Virginia and southwest Pennsylvania. Tornadoes are possible in Louisiana and Mississippi. Several inches of rain are expected with flood warnings in parts of Arkansas, Missouri, Texas, and Oklahoma, and flood watches stretching from Texas to Pennsylvania. Snow is forecast in Colorado, New Mexico, and the Northeast. Chances of precipitation increase east, right up east of the Mississippi River tomorrow as the system moves towards the coast. A federal law banning gun sales to individuals under the age of 21 has been ruled unconstitutional. The law, signed in 1968, was initially upheld in 2012 by the Supreme Court. But today, the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals overturned the law. The justices say that 18 to 20-year-olds are among the people whose right to keep and bear arms is protected. It is unclear right now if that protection now belongs to minors as well. And the Denver Public Schools' decision to change a women's restroom into one that serves all genders at a high school has the Department of Education investigating tonight. The Office of Civil Rights says that choosing to eliminate only women's bathrooms while keeping all men's bathrooms violates the rights of the female students in those schools. Denver Public Schools says the changes were made following a student-led process. They also requested more money to be able to change some male bathrooms as well. Within the last 24 hours, ICE, DEA, and local law enforcement have announced the arrests of several members of the criminal Venezuelan gang Tren de Aragua in New York, also Chicago, Denver, as well as outside of Nashville, Tennessee. ICE agents are now working with the Trump administration on next steps for the arrested parties. President Trump signed the Lake and Riley Act just yesterday into law, allowing ICE to detain arrested illegal migrants with the possibility of immediately deporting them. Retired FBI agent Chris Hinckley told the National News Desk he supports that outcome.
I think the best thing to do is deport them immediately. They don't have any rights under the Constitution.
The woman facing gun charges in the death of a Border Patrol agent last week is now being held without bail. Teresa Youngblood of Washington is accused of shooting at agents during a traffic stop in Vermont. A resulting shootout killed Agent David Mayland and a man traveling with Youngblood. We've also learned Youngblood had been in contact with someone connected to killings in Pennsylvania and California, according to prosecutors. On Capitol Hill today, Robert F. Kennedy Jr., President Trump's pick to run Health and Human Services, sat for a second day of questioning. One of the issues Democrats have been focusing on has been previous statements RFK Jr. has made, seeming to indicate a connection between vaccines and birth defects like autism and other disorders. Senator Maggie Hassan made an emotional appeal against those claims.
That I am the proud mother of a 36-year-old young man with severe cerebral palsy. And a day does not go by when I don't think about what did I do when I was pregnant with him that might have caused the hydrocephalus that has so impacted his life. So please do not suggest that anybody in this body of either political party doesn't want to know what the cause of autism is.
President Trump's pick for Director of National Intelligence, former Democratic Congresswoman Tulsi Gabbard, received harsh backlash for her legislation that she wrote as a member that would have dropped charges against Edward Snowden after he leaked sensitive national security secrets.
Do you still think Edward Snowden is brave?
Mr. Vice Chairman, Edward Snowden broke the law. I do not agree with or support with all of the information and intelligence that he released, nor the way in which he did it.
But then there were more fireworks as Trump's pick to lead the FBI, Kash Patel, faced questions about past statements where he appeared to promise political retribution. National correspondent Matt Gelka has a look at what was said.
So help you God.
President Donald Trump's pick to lead the FBI, Kash Patel, was hammered by Democrats for repeated statements advocating for going after political enemies.
Mr. Patel has neither the experience, the temperament, nor the judgment to lead.
Patel has experience working with intelligence and defense in Trump's first term, but has gone on to repeatedly bash government agencies and what he calls the deep state. He published a book, Government Gangsters, with a so-called enemies list.
Is Bill Barr on your list of whatever you want to call them, been referred to as an enemies list? You've called them deep state.
Well, it's not whatever we want to call it, Senator. With all due respect, it's not an enemies list. That is a total mischaracterization.
North Carolina Republican Tom Tillis made a bingo card to mock Democrats for bringing up Patel's past comments and show support for the nominee.
Some may view this as an unserious caricature and not appropriate for this committee. Sadly, I consider it a serious caricature of what I expect to be witnessed today.
Patel claimed he went on Fringe podcasts to debunk their views, and he made his case to shake up the FBI and restore trust that he says Americans have lost in the agency.
The only thing that will matter if I'm confirmed as the director of the FBI is a de-weaponized, depoliticized system of law enforcement completely devoted to rigorous obedience of the Constitution.
He also said he wouldn't go backwards when pressed on investigating perceived enemies.
If President Trump were to order you to open an investigation into any of these individuals, let's say Vice President Harris, would you?
Senator, this question speaks directly to my ability to leave political bias and allow independent behavior to be the only guiding light.
Patel also appeared to break with the president on January 6th pardons, saying he did not agree with commuting the sentences of people who had committed violence against law enforcement. Reporting in Washington, I'm Matt Gelka for the National News Desk, America's News Now.
Okay, Matt, thank you. Coming up, we are learning more about the victims of the tragic plane crash in Washington, D.C. that killed 67 people, the athletic community that was deeply impacted by that tragedy. Then what Israel's prime minister is calling for to ensure hostages are safe as they continue to be freed from Hamas captivity. And later, the steps advocates in one state are taking to protect immigrants from ICE agents. We're back in 90 seconds. Tonight, the community in Wichita, Kansas, coming together to mourn. A special prayer service happening earlier this afternoon in that city after a fatal midair collision between a plane headed from Wichita to D.C.'s Reagan Airport and a Black Hawk military chopper collided. 67 people killed between those two aircrafts. Earlier today, Wichita's mayor visibly emotional while calling for unity.
We have been told that there are no survivors. We mourn with all those who have been impacted. This is a terrible tragedy that will unite those in Washington, D.C. and Wichita, Kansas forever.
The weight of the crash sitting heavy on the hearts of so many tonight, but has been especially difficult for the communities disproportionately affected. Out of those 60 passengers on the plane, 14, we understand, were from the U.S. figure skating community. They were returning from the U.S. Figure Skating's National Development Camp taking place in Wichita. Tonight, we know multiple skaters were from Northern Virginia. We also know at least 6 of them were from the Skating Club of Boston. Our Aaron Coogan is in Norwood, Massachusetts, with what we're learning about the great athletes that have been lost.
Well, absolutely heartbreaking. The devastation almost palpable here at the Skating Club of Boston in Norwood. Husband and wife Vadim Nomov and Genia Shishkova were coaches. They had won the pairs title at the 1994 Figure Skating World Championships in Japan before becoming coaches at the Skating Club of Boston in 2017. Gina Hahn was a teen Olympic hopeful with her mom, Jin. Spencer Lane and his mom, Christine, just before that flight took off, Spencer posted a picture of the plane's wing on his Instagram story, referencing that flight path of both airports with 3 letters. About 2 hours before that, he also posted on his public skating page about the camp he had just attended. He wrote, quote, "I am so happy to have qualified for National Development Camp earlier in November. It's been my goal almost every year since I became aware of that it was a thing. I learned so much new information that I can apply to my everyday life and met so many amazing people."
You know, what we realize is skating is a community, and, you know, these kids might compete when they're on the ice, but when they're off the ice, they're part of a family and they're tight. They train here 6 to 7 days a week. So it's really their second home, their second family, and we're all feeling this very hard.
Meanwhile, throughout the day here at the Skating Club of Boston in Norwood, we've seen members of the skating community, families, and other club members come down to bring flowers and send their condolences.
Turning now to the Middle East, 8 hostages held by Hamas, 5 of whom were Thai nationals, were freed today, but not without more controversy during the exchange. The first hostage released was 20-year-old Israeli female soldier Agam Berger, and you can see the emotional reunion with her parents. But as you can see here, the handoffs of the captives from Hamas militants to Israeli officials is chaotic. Israel says it's a danger to the released hostages and is now calling on the international mediators to ensure hostages are safe when they are released. But for now, the ceasefire holds, with more hostages and prisoners expected to be exchanged tomorrow. President Trump's special envoy to the Middle East, Steve Witkoff, is in Tel Aviv and spoke about when the Americans held will be freed.
What efforts are underway to make sure the Americans get home as soon as possible?
Thank you very much, sir.
We're on top of it all for the Americans. One is coming out tomorrow.
Stranded NASA astronauts Butch Wilmore and Sonny Williams have a new milestone under their belt. Today, they completed their first spacewalk together since they got to the International Space Station in June. They removed a broken radio antenna and collected surface material samples for analysis. Their mission, which was extended multiple times, is set to end in March or April. Many teenagers are being misled by fake content on the internet. That's according to Common Sense Media, which surveyed 1,000 teens about media created by artificial intelligence. 35% said they'd been deceived by fake content online. 41% said they'd seen images that were real but misleading. 22% said they'd shared content that they later found out was fake. Millions of people suffer from a condition that causes chronic itchy skin and tends to get worse in the colder months. Medical reporter Liz Bonus explains some emerging ways to treat it.
Hey there, everybody. It's a common skin condition, often gets worse in the winter, according to dermatologists. Atopic dermatitis, however, does have newer treatments now to reduce symptoms and future health risks that can result from those symptoms. A quick social media search, and it's easy to see a lot of people have those symptoms.
Atopic dermatitis is a chronic, itchy, inflammatory skin rash it's a disorder that affects about 20% of pediatrics and about 10% of adults.
Dr. Elizabeth Munich of Ohio's Dermatology and Skincare Associates told me for a long time those such as Greg Blankenship had to be treated with steroids for atopic dermatitis. And is there a cure for it, or do you just have to control the symptoms?
It's pretty chronic, no great cure, but we do have newer treatments.
Those newer treatments include several just approved within the last year by the Food and Drug Administration. One is a new injectable biologic, which means it was a medication isolated from a variety of natural sources. Another is a topical cream that's not a steroid. And in development, a medication that may address a missing protein called filigrin in those with this skin cell condition.
So that protein actually sticks the skin cells together. So when that protein is deficient, then these cells aren't stuck together as well as they should be, and then you tend to lose a little bit of water, and then it's hard to keep the moisture, the hydration in the skin.
Dr. Munich says in addition, fractional thulium lasers, such as this one, can help open up the skin so the medication can be delivered more effectively, and you can get clearer skin with a lot less itchiness. Now, in most cases, these treatments are covered by your medical insurance plan. With your health news, I'm Liz Bonus reporting.
Okay, Liz, thank you. And coming up, the action people in Texas are calling for to stop the state from running out of water. We'll be right back. We have reporters all across the country in your neighborhoods covering the issues that matter most to you. We're taking the pulse of America, and we begin in Ohio, where organizations are helping immigrants understand their rights.
Nancy Sullivan is handing out these red cards left and right. One side is in English and says, "I don't wish to speak with you," and "I don't give you permission to enter my home." The other side is in Spanish and explains one's constitutional rights.
Sometimes people who would rather you not know that because it's easier. I can detain you if you do not know what your rights are and you open the door. Just opening the door is considered an invitation.
Sullivan is speaking at school board meetings and going to businesses, urging them to make a plan for what to do if agents show up.
It's sad and scary. Bird bodies are becoming all too common in Taunton. Just look at this near Lake Sebastian. Carcasses can be seen floating in the water.
They always be there. They usually be flying to go to a warm spot, but now I've been seeing them there.
It's an unsettling sight, and people are taking notice.
Watching the birds eliminate piece by piece is even worse.
City leaders believe bird flu is to blame. Mass Wildlife has been busy collecting specimens around the state with hundreds of sightings in the wild.
Current Massachusetts cases are primarily located from Greater Boston through the southeast portion of the state.
Taunton's fire chief says this Friday, firefighters will team up with animal control to dispose of dead birds around the city, including those around Lake Sebastian.
We're at a critical stage when it comes to water in Texas.
A growing number of Texas lawmakers are calling for massive investments in the state's water infrastructure. Today, that list includes Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick, the Senate's leader, who named it among his top priorities. Representative Ellen Troxclair represents much of Lake Travis.
We have to think critically about not just catching up, to where we need to be for today's growth, but also being more proactive and preparing for the future.
Recent self-reported audits from across the state indicate Texas loses as much as 88 billion gallons of water a year as a result of things like leaky pipes. In the capital city alone, every Austinite loses an estimated 22 gallons of water every day.
Coming up, the musicians performing tonight at a concert supporting the victims of those devastating California wildfires. We'll be right back. Tonight, an evening of music and solidarity as some of the top singers and bands come together to support the victims of the raging wildfires. The Palisades and Eden fires, they claimed a lot of lives. They burned thousands of homes and businesses and left the greater LA community devastated. The Fire Aid Benefit Concert, happening at two major venues in LA, feature more than 20 artists from various genres, including Sting, Jelly Roll, Lady Gaga, Earth, Wind and Fire, Stevie Wonder, Billie Eilish, and the Red Hot Chili Peppers. For those of you who can't attend, the good news, you can stream it almost everywhere, including on Amazon Prime Video, Facebook, YouTube, Netflix, and Hulu. Proceeds from the concert, along with donations, go directly toward rebuilding communities. And if you'd like to donate, just visit fireaidla.org. The concert kicks off at 9 p.m. Eastern. That does it for this edition of the National News Desk. We invite you to join us again this evening as we continue to follow all of the developments on last night's deadly midair crash. I'm Amira David. Thank you so much for watching.